Imagine trying to build a democracy from scratch in the middle of a total disaster. That's pretty much the story of Germany's Weimar Republic. It was born from the ashes of World War I, and right from day one, it was hit with a storm of political violence and economic collapse that threatened to just tear it apart. In this explainer, we'll dig into how it survived its incredible trial by fire. So that brings us to this really big question. What happens when you try to build a democracy on a foundation of military defeat? For Germany's new government, it meant dealing with this massive national humiliation while trying to unite a country that was just deeply divided and incredibly angry. This wasn't just some political experiment. No, this was a flat-out fight for survival. So what was fueling all this anger? Well, at the very heart of it was this toxic, poisonous lie, the Dolchstoßmyth. This idea spread like wildfire, and it claimed that the mighty German army was never actually beaten on the battlefield. No, it was stabbed in the back by its own politicians. This one idea, this single myth, was just devastating. It fatally undermined the new democratic government before it even had a chance to get on its feet. And pouring fuel on that fire was the Treaty of Versailles itself. The Germans didn't see it as a peace treaty. To them, it was a diktat, a dictated peace. They were forced to take all the blame for the war and pay these crippling reparations. The whole nation felt deeply humiliated. And the politicians who signed the treaty, they were immediately branded as traitors. So, into this incredibly hostile environment steps the new democratic government, led by a guy named Friedrich Ebert. They had this grand vision of building a modern, democratic Germany. But right away, they were threatened by extremists from both the left and the right, and both sides were dead set on ripping the new republic to shreds. The first big test, it came almost immediately. We're talking just a couple of months after the war ended. In January 1919, a far-left group called the Spartacists, inspired by the Russian Revolution, tried to start their own revolution to create a communist Germany. It all went down fast and it was violent. The Spartacists took over buildings in Berlin. Now, President Ebert didn't have a reliable army to call on, so he made this just a desperate, maybe even a dirty choice. He called in the Freikorps. These are right-wing, anti-communist ex-soldiers who hated the Spartacists. Within days, the revolt was brutally crushed, and its famous leaders, Luxemburg and Liebknecht, were murdered. So the Republic survived, yeah, but it did so by making a deal with its future enemies, and it lost the trust of the left forever. And then, in this just unbelievable twist, barely a year later, the next major threat came from the very same Freikorps. You heard that right. The very same soldiers the government had just used to save itself, yeah, they were now marching on Berlin to tear it all down. So here's what happened. The government, trying to follow the rules of the Versailles Treaty, attempted to disband the Freikorps. Their leader, Wolfgang Kapp, wasn't having it. He marched his troops right into Berlin. The government had to flee, and they ordered the regular army to defend the Republic. And the army's response? It's just bone-chilling. Troops do not fire on troops. So who saved democracy? Not the soldiers. The people. The government called for a massive general strike, and the whole country just shut down. After only 4 days, Kapp had to give up and flee. So when you put these two events side by side, you really see the impossible spot the Republic was in. It was getting squeezed in a vice from both sides, the communists on the left and the nationalists on the right. Sure, it survived both attacks, but the big lesson here was just how dangerously weak the government was. It couldn't even count on its own army and had to rely on extremist militias or the power of its own workers just to stay alive. Okay, so as if all that political violence wasn't enough, an economic catastrophe was brewing. And this one would shake German society to its very core and create millions of new enemies for this young republic. It all started with those reparations payments. In 1923, Germany missed a payment. So French and Belgian troops marched in and occupied the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland, to basically take what they were owed in the form of goods. The German government, being too weak to fight back with its army, called for passive resistance. It told all the workers to go on strike. But then, how do you pay all those striking workers? Well, the government made a decision that would prove to be absolutely disastrous. It just started printing more money. A lot more money. With all the factories shut down and trillions of new worthless marks flooding the economy, the currency completely collapsed. And the result was hyperinflation on a scale that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. Money became completely meaningless. By November of 1923, prices were literally doubling every few hours. This quote says it all, and it's not an exaggeration. People literally needed wheelbarrows overflowing with cash just to go buy a single loaf of bread. The human cost was just devastating. The middle class, the very people who are supposed to be the foundation of a stable democracy, saw their entire life savings just vanish, poof, overnight. Pensioners were ruined. For millions of Germans, this wasn't just an economic crisis. It felt like a deep, personal betrayal by democracy itself, and it pushed so many of them towards extremist politics. So by the end of 1923, you have to kind of step back and wonder, how was the Republic even still standing? It had been through revolutions from the left and the right, a foreign occupation of its industrial heartland, and a complete economic meltdown. It was standing, but the scars from this trial by fire, they ran deep. The legacy of this whole period was just toxic. The political divide wasn't a crack anymore, it was a canyon. The government, it looked weak, always relying on somebody else to save it. The army had proven that it couldn't be trusted. And maybe most dangerous of all, the middle class, the people who should have been the Republic's biggest supporters, now felt like the system had completely and utterly failed them. So yes, the Weimar Republic survived its trial by fire, but, and this is the crucial part, all that chaos, all that betrayal, all that economic ruin, it left behind this fertile ground of anger and resentment. The Republic's enemies, they were watching. They were learning from their failures, and they were just waiting for their next chance to strike.